Good evening and welcome to Myths for Sleep. I'm James, and tonight we'll journey into Roman mythology with the profound tale of Janus. Discover how this two-faced god became the eternal guardian of thresholds, transitions, and the sacred doorways between past and future. If this story guides you toward peaceful sleep, please give it a like. Your support helps me create more soothing tales for your restful nights. Also, let me know in the comments which mythological story you'd love to hear next. Make yourself comfortable and let the wisdom of Janus carry you gently into dreams. In the ancient mists of Roman legend, there lived a god unlike any other. His name was Janus, and he possessed something that made him unique among all the divine beings who walked between heaven and earth. Two faces adorned his head, one looking forward into the future, one gazing back into the past. Long before the great city of Rome rose from the 7 hills, before the first stone was laid or the first road paved, Janus watched over the world from his sacred place. He was the guardian of thresholds, the keeper of doors and gateways, the divine protector of all beginnings and endings. The Romans believed that Janus was there at the very creation of the world, witnessing the first dawn with one face, while the other contemplated the eternal darkness that came before. He understood, perhaps better than any being, that every moment contains both memory and possibility, that every breath we take stands at the crossroads between what was and what might be. In the quiet temples dedicated to his worship, priests would speak in hushed tones about Janus's wisdom. They said he could see the consequences of every choice before it was made, could witness the echoes of every decision as it rippled through time. This made him not just a god of doorways, but a god of understanding, of the deep knowledge that comes from seeing life in its fullness. When morning came to the ancient world, farmers would whisper prayers to Janus as they opened their doors to begin the day's work. When evening fell and families gathered around their hearths, they would offer thanks to him as they closed those same doors, sealing in warmth and safety for the night. Janus taught the Romans something profound about the nature of time itself. He showed them that the present moment is not a single point, period, but a bridge connecting past and future. Every threshold we cross, every door we open or close, every beginning we embrace or ending we accept, carries within it the weight of all our yesterdays and the promise of all our tomorrows. The ancient texts tell us that Janus was not born like other gods. Instead, he emerged from the very fabric of existence itself, manifesting when the universe first needed someone to stand guard at the boundaries between one thing and another. He became the eternal sentinel, watching over every transition, every change, every moment of transformation. In his temples, which always had doors facing both east and west, visitors would come seeking guidance about new ventures. They understood that Janus, with his unique perspective, could help them see both the wisdom learned from experience and the courage needed to step into the unknown. As the centuries passed and Rome grew from a small settlement to a mighty empire, Janus remained constant, unchanging in his vigil. He watched as countless generations passed through the doorways of life, each person carrying their own hopes and fears, their own stories of beginning and ending. And in his infinite patience, he offered the same gift to all, a period, the understanding that every ending makes space for a new beginning, and every beginning honors what came before. The Romans honored Janus in a way that would forever mark the rhythm of human time. They gave him the first month of the year, January, naming it Januarius in his honor, so that every new year would begin under his watchful protection. January became more than just a name on the calendar. It became a sacred time of reflection and renewal, when people would look back on the year that had passed while setting their intentions for the year to come. In temples across the Roman world, priests would light special fires that burned throughout the month, their flames flickering like the gods' eternal vigilance. The celebration of Janus in January was not filled with wild festivities or loud proclamations. Instead, it was marked by quiet contemplation, by families gathering to share stories of the past year and dreams for the next. Children would learn from their elders about the importance of thresholds, about how every door they would ever walk through carried meaning. In the gentle morning light of those January days, Romans would perform a ritual as simple as it was profound. They would stand in their doorways, one foot in their home and one foot outside, embodying the balance that Janus represented. In this position, suspended between inside and outside, between private and public worlds, they would offer their prayers and set their intentions. The wisdom of Janus taught them that true understanding comes not from rushing toward the future or clinging to the past, but from standing peacefully at the threshold between them. In this sacred space of transition, they learned to find clarity about what they wanted to carry forward and what they were ready to leave behind. Merchants would begin new ventures in January, knowing that Janus would bless their endeavors with his protection. Farmers would plan their plantings, understanding that the god of beginnings would watch over their seeds as they transformed from dormancy to life. Artists and craftsmen would start new projects, trusting in the divine inspiration that flowed from the God who understood the creative process of bringing something new into being. But January was also a time for ending things that no longer served. Old grudges would be forgiven, unnecessary possessions would be given away, and habits that brought no joy would be gently released. Janus taught that endings were not failures, but necessary clearings, making space for new growth and possibility. The priests of Janus developed special prayers for the changing of years, words that honored both the completion of one cycle and the commencement of another. These prayers were not requests for specific outcomes, but expressions of trust in the natural flow of time and change. They asked not for an easy path, but for the wisdom to navigate whatever threshold they might encounter. As the month progressed, Romans would notice how their perception of time itself seemed to shift. Days felt both longer and shorter, filled with the peaceful awareness that they were participating in something larger than themselves. The presence of Janus made every moment feel significant, every choice meaningful, every breath a conscious step across the threshold of existence. In the quiet evenings of January, families would gather around their hearths and share the stories that Janus had helped them understand. They spoke of how every person's life was like a doorway, with the past providing the foundation and the future offering the destination. The present moment, they learned, was the threshold itself, period. The sacred space where transformation happened. In the heart of Rome stood a temple unlike any other in the ancient world. The Temple of Janus was a simple building, rectangular and modest, but its significance reached far beyond its physical walls. This sacred space held within it the power to declare the state of the entire Roman world. The temple had doors at both ends, and these doors carried a profound responsibility. When Rome was at peace, the doors would be closed, sealed shut to hold the tranquility within. When the empire was at war, the doors would stand open, allowing the god of transitions to watch over the soldiers and guide them through the ultimate threshold between life and death. For much of Roman history, these doors remained open. The empire was vast and its borders constantly shifting, requiring military campaigns to maintain order and expand territory. But there were precious moments, rare and treasured times, when peace settled over the known world like a gentle blanket. During these peaceful interludes, the closing of Janus's temple doors became a ceremony of profound meaning. Citizens would gather from across the city, bringing offerings of flowers, honey, and wine. Children would sing soft songs about the blessing of safety, while elders shared stories of the conflicts that had finally ended. The act of closing the doors was performed with great reverence. The emperor himself would often participate, understanding that this moment represented not just the absence of war, but the presence of something deeper. True peace, the Romans learned from Janus, was not merely the stopping of conflict, but the active cultivation of harmony. When the doors were closed, something remarkable happened in the city. People walked more slowly, spoke more gently, looked into each other's eyes with greater kindness. Markets flourished not just with goods, but with genuine connections between buyers and sellers. Artists found inspiration in the settled atmosphere, creating works that captured the beauty of a world at rest. The temple served as a reminder that Janus understood war and peace not as opposites, but as different phases in the eternal cycle of human existence. War, though painful, sometimes served as a necessary transition, clearing away what could not coexist and making space for new forms of order. Peace, though precious, was not meant to be static, but a time for growth, creativity, and preparation for whatever changes lay ahead. The priests who tended the temple developed rituals for both the opening and closing of the doors. When war was declared and the doors were opened, they would pray for the protection of soldiers and the swift resolution of conflict. They asked Janus to guide commanders to wise decisions and to help warriors remember their humanity even in the heat of battle. When peace was declared and the doors were closed, the prayers shifted to gratitude and commitment. They thanked Janus for his guidance through the darkness of conflict, and they pledged to use the gift of peace wisely. They prayed for the healing of wounds both visible and hidden, for the reunion of families separated by war, and for the wisdom to build a world that could sustain harmony. Visitors to the temple often reported feeling a profound sense of perspective within its walls. Standing between the two doors, they could sense the weight of history and the possibility of the future. They understood that their individual struggles and triumphs were part of a larger pattern, woven into the eternal story of human experience that Janus observed with his dual gaze. The temple taught Romans that true strength lay not in the ability to wage war or maintain peace, but in the wisdom to know when each was necessary and the grace to transition between them. This lesson extended beyond matters of empire to the personal lives of citizens, helping them understand that their own hearts could be temples of Janus, places where they could choose between conflict and harmony in their daily relationships. Among all of Janus's sacred symbols, none was more important than the key he carried. This was not an ordinary key made of bronze or iron, but a divine instrument that could unlock any door, open any gateway, and reveal any hidden passage between one state of being and another. The Romans understood that this key represented more than physical access to locked places. It symbolized the power to unlock understanding, to open hearts that had been closed by fear or pain, and to reveal the hidden connections between all things. In their prayers, they would ask Janus to use his key to open their minds to wisdom and their spirits to possibility. Families would hang small keys by their doorways as talismans of Janus's protection. These keys served as reminders that every threshold in their lives, from the mundane act of entering a room to the profound experience of entering a new phase of life, was an opportunity for transformation. Children would learn to touch these keys gently as they passed, offering brief prayers for guidance and protection. The priests taught that Janus's key could unlock 3 types of doors. The first were the doors of memory, allowing people to access the wisdom of their past experiences without being trapped by old sorrows or regrets. The second were the doors of possibility, revealing paths forward that might not have been visible before. The third, and most sacred, were the doors of the present moment, where past and future met in the eternal now. Students and scholars particularly revered Janus as the keeper of keys to knowledge. They believed that true learning was not the accumulation of facts, but the development of the ability to unlock understanding from experience. Before important examinations or philosophical debates, they would visit Janus's shrines and ask for his key to unlock their minds to clear thinking and wise expression. Healers and physicians also sought Janus's blessing, understanding that wellness often required unlocking the doors between illness and health. They prayed for his key to reveal the hidden causes of suffering and to open pathways to healing. Many believed that Janus could unlock the mystery of how the body and spirit work together, revealing treatments that addressed not just symptoms, but the whole person. Artists and craftsmen saw in Janus's key a symbol of creative inspiration. They understood that creativity required the ability to unlock new ways of seeing familiar things, to open doors between the world as it appeared and the world as it could be imagined. Painters would invoke Janus before beginning a new work, asking him to unlock their vision to see the hidden beauty in their subjects. The key of Janus was said to be most powerful during times of personal transition. When someone was facing a difficult decision, experiencing a major life change, or struggling to understand their purpose, they would seek the god's intercession. They would meditate on the image of his key, visualizing it turning in the lock of their confusion, opening the door to clarity and peace. Parents would tell their children stories about how Janus's key could unlock the doors to growing up. They explained that becoming an adult was not about age or size, but about developing the wisdom to know which doors to open and which to keep closed. They taught that maturity came from understanding that with every door opened, new responsibilities and opportunities would be found on the other side. Elderly Romans found comfort in the belief that Janus's key would eventually unlock the final door between life and death. They did not fear this ultimate threshold, trusting that the God who had guided them through all their previous transitions would be there to help them navigate this last one. They spoke of death not as an ending, but as the opening of a door to whatever lay beyond. In quiet moments of contemplation, Romans would reflect on how Janus's key had worked in their own lives. They would remember the doors that had opened to bring them love, friendship, purpose, and understanding. They would acknowledge the doors that had closed, protecting them from paths that would not have served their highest good. And they would trust that the God with two faces would continue to hold the key to their future transformations, unlocking exactly what they needed when they needed it most. as the centuries passed and Roman civilization flourished. The teachings of Janus evolved into a profound philosophy of living. The god with two faces had shown his people that life itself was an endless series of thresholds, each one an opportunity for growth and understanding. Philosophers would gather in the gardens and porticos of Rome, discussing the deeper meanings hidden within Janus's dual nature. They spoke of how his backward-facing visage represented the necessity of learning from experience, while his forward-facing countenance embodied the courage to embrace the unknown. Neither perspective alone was sufficient, they argued, but together they created the wisdom needed for a well-lived life. Young Romans would come to these philosophical gatherings seeking guidance about their futures. The elder teachers would share the story of how Janus taught that every transition contained its own intelligence, its own perfect timing that could not be rushed or avoided. They learned that trying to skip the difficult passages of life was like trying to enter a house without walking through the doorway. Impossible and ultimately counterproductive. The concept of sacred timing became central to Roman understanding of Janus's wisdom. Farmers knew that seeds planted too early would be killed by frost, while those planted too late would not have enough growing season to mature. Similarly, human endeavors required attunement to the natural rhythms of beginning and ending, of preparation and action, of effort and rest. Merchants traveling the extensive Roman road system would carry small images of Janus, understanding that every journey was both a leaving behind and an arrival. They prayed to him not just for safe passage, but for the wisdom to appreciate what they encountered along the way. They learned that the value of travel lay not only in reaching the destination, but in the transformation that occurred during the journey itself. The medical practitioners of Rome incorporated Janus's teachings into their understanding of health and healing. They observed that recovery from illness often involved passing through different stages, each with its own characteristics and requirements. Patients were taught to honor these transitions, to neither resist the discomfort of healing, nor try to force the process to move faster than it naturally would. Marriages were blessed with special ceremonies honoring Janus, acknowledging that the union of two people required both individuals to pass through the threshold from independence to partnership. Couples would pledge not only their love for each other, but their commitment to supporting each other through all the transitions their shared life would bring. They understood that a strong marriage was not one without change, but one that could navigate change together. The education of children was designed around Janus's principles of gradual transition. Rather than expecting sudden transformations from childhood to adulthood, Roman society created multiple initiation ceremonies and rites of passage. Each milestone acknowledged a specific threshold crossed, a particular capability developed, a new level of responsibility embraced. Elderly Romans became the living embodiments of Janus's wisdom, having experienced countless transitions throughout their long lives. They served as counselors and guides for younger generations, sharing stories of how they had navigated difficult passages and learned to trust the process of change. Their presence in Roman society was treasured, as they represented the accumulation of transition wisdom that only came through lived experience. The concept of death as a transition rather than an ending became deeply embedded in Roman culture through Janus's influence. Funerals were conducted as threshold ceremonies, acknowledging the sorrow of separation, while also celebrating the completion of a life's journey. Families found comfort in the belief that their loved ones had simply passed through another doorway, one that led to a realm beyond their current understanding, but still within the watchful care of the God who oversaw all transitions. As Roman influence spread throughout the Mediterranean world, the wisdom of Janus traveled with it. Local deities and spiritual practices were often integrated with Janus's teachings, creating rich tapestries of understanding about the sacred nature of change and transition. The God with two faces became a universal symbol of the human experience, representing the eternal dance between holding on and letting go that defines every life. Beyond his role as the god of doorways and transitions, Janus held a special relationship with the turning of the seasons. His two faces allowed him to witness the eternal cycle of death and rebirth that marked the passage of each year, making him the perfect guardian of nature's own transitions. In spring, when the earth awakened from winter sleep, Romans would see Janus's forward-facing aspect in every budding tree and emerging flower. Farmers would invoke his blessing as they prepared their fields, understanding that successful planting required both the wisdom of past harvests and faith in future growth. The god's presence could be felt in the gentle warming of the soil, in the lengthening of days, and in the irrepressible urge of life to begin again. Summer brought the fullness of Janus's forward-looking vision into manifestation. The promises of spring were kept as crops grew tall and strong under the generous sun. But even in this season of abundance, the wise could see hints of the harvest to come, reminders that every beginning carried within it the seeds of its own completion. Janus taught that true appreciation of summer's gifts came from understanding their temporary nature. Autumn was perhaps the season where Janus's dual nature was most clearly visible. His backward-facing visage could see the full story of the growing season that was ending, while his forward gaze already contemplated the rest and renewal that winter would bring. Harvest festivals became celebrations of this transition, honoring both the completion of one cycle and the preparation for the next. During the harvest, Romans would gather not just crops, but also the lessons that the growing season had taught them. They reflected on which plantings had thrived and which had struggled, understanding that Janus was offering them guidance for future seasons. The god's wisdom reminded them that apparent failures often contained hidden teachings, while obvious successes might reveal areas where improvement was still possible. Winter brought the deepest teachings of Janus's backward-looking face. In the stillness of the cold months, when the earth rested beneath blankets of snow, Romans would spend long evenings reflecting on the year that had passed. They understood that this season of apparent emptiness was actually a time of profound preparation, when the soil gathered strength for the next growing cycle. The winter solstice held special significance as a festival of Janus. This was the moment when the sun's journey reached its furthest point from the earth, creating the longest night of the year. But it was also the turning point, the threshold where darkness began its retreat and light started its return. Romans would light candles and fires during this celebration, creating physical symbols of the spiritual truth that Janus embodied, that every ending contained a beginning. Families would gather during the winter months to share stories and preserve the wisdom of their ancestors. Elders would speak of seasons they had witnessed, of particularly abundant harvests and difficult years of scarcity. These stories served as more than entertainment. They were teachings about resilience, about the importance of planning and saving during times of plenty to survive times of want. Children would learn to read the subtle signs that Janus revealed through nature's transitions. They discovered how to notice the first hints of spring in the behavior of birds returning from their southern journeys, or how to sense the approaching autumn in the changing quality of light. These skills connected them deeply to the rhythms of the earth, teaching them that they were not separate from nature but part of its eternal dance of change. The seasonal festivals dedicated to Janus became times of community healing and renewal. People would gather to forgive old grievances, understanding that holding on to past hurts prevented them from fully entering the new season. They would also make commitments to personal growth, setting intentions that aligned with the energy of the coming months. Gardeners and farmers developed elaborate rituals around the seasonal transitions, always invoking Janus's blessing as they moved from one phase of cultivation to the next. They understood that successful agriculture required more than just technical knowledge. It demanded a spiritual partnership with the forces of growth and change. Seeds were planted with prayers, crops were tended with reverence, and harvests were gathered with gratitude. The changing seasons also taught Romans about the importance of patience and trust in natural timing. They learned that just as a farmer could not force a seed to sprout before its time, human endeavors also required respect for organic rhythms of development. This wisdom influenced everything from child-rearing practices to business ventures, encouraging people to work with natural cycles rather than against them. Weather patterns were seen as communications from Janus about the spiritual climate of the times. Gentle rains were interpreted as blessings, while harsh storms were understood as calls for reflection and preparation. Rather than seeing themselves as victims of weather, Romans learned to read these patterns as guidance for how to align their lives with larger cosmic rhythms. Through his guardianship of the seasons, Janus taught that change was not something to be feared or resisted, but embraced as the fundamental creative force of existence. Each season brought its own gifts and challenges, its own opportunities for growth and learning. The god's eternal watchfulness assured Romans that no matter how difficult a particular season might be, it would eventually give way to something new, something that could not exist without the preparation that came before. as the Roman Empire evolved and centuries turned like pages in an endless book. The presence of Janus remained constant, a steady beacon of wisdom in a world of continuous change. His temples might crumble and his festivals might be forgotten by some, but the truths he embodied proved timeless and universal. The philosophers and poets of later Rome understood that Janus represented something fundamental about human consciousness itself. They recognized that every person carried within them the god's dual nature, the ability to look backward into memory and forward into imagination. This capacity, they realized, was what made humans uniquely capable of learning from experience and planning for the future. In the quiet moments before sleep, Romans would often reflect on how Janus had guided them through the transitions of their day. They would acknowledge the thresholds they had crossed, from the simple act of leaving their homes in the morning to the more complex transitions between different roles and responsibilities. Each crossing had been an opportunity to embody the god's wisdom, to bring consciousness and intention to the process of change. The legacy of Janus extended beyond individual lives to influence how Romans understood their place in history. They saw their civilization as standing at a great threshold, with one face honoring the achievements of their ancestors, and the other envisioning the possibilities that lay ahead for future generations. This perspective helped them balance pride in their accomplishments with humility about what remained to be learned and achieved. Artists and architects incorporated Janus's symbolism into their works, creating buildings and sculptures that embodied the principle of transition. Doorways were designed not just as functional passages, but as sacred spaces where transformation could occur. Gardens were planned with pathways that revealed different perspectives as visitors moved through them, demonstrating how physical movement could mirror spiritual journey. The medical understanding of the time embraced Janus's teaching that health existed at the threshold between various states of being. Physicians learned to see illness not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a transition that could lead to greater wholeness if navigated with wisdom. They developed treatments that honored both the need to let go of what was causing suffering and the need to cultivate what would support healing. In the realm of governance, leaders invoked Janus's guidance when making decisions that would affect the future of their communities. They understood that wise leadership required the ability to learn from past successes and failures while remaining open to new solutions and approaches. Laws were crafted with consideration for both established traditions and evolving social needs, creating frameworks that could adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining stability. As individual Romans aged and approached the final transition of their lives, many found profound comfort in Janus's presence. They had learned through experience that every threshold they had ever crossed had led to new understanding and growth, even when the passage had been difficult or frightening. This gave them confidence that death itself was not an ending, but another doorway, one that would lead to whatever came next with the same protective guidance they had always known. The rituals surrounding death incorporated Janus's symbolism of transition and transformation. Funeral ceremonies acknowledged both the sorrow of separation and the mystery of what lay beyond. Families would speak of their loved ones as having passed through a doorway that was temporarily invisible to them, but still within the realm of the God who watched over all passages between one state of being and another. In the deepest teachings of Janus's wisdom, Romans discovered that the God's true gift was not his ability to predict the future or control the past, but his capacity to help them find peace in the present moment. Standing at the eternal threshold between what was and what could be, they learned to inhabit fully the sacred space of now. The God with two faces taught that this present moment was itself a doorway, a passage through which infinite possibilities flowed. By learning to rest in awareness of this eternal threshold, Romans found that they could access both the wisdom of their experience and the creative potential of their imagination. They discovered that peace came not from trying to stop the flow of change, but from learning to dance gracefully with the rhythms of transition. And so Janus continued his eternal watch, guardian of all thresholds, keeper of all keys, protector of all who must navigate the sacred passages of existence. His presence reminded every soul that they were never alone in their transitions. That divine wisdom was always available to guide them through whatever doorway they needed to cross. In the gentle rhythm of his watchfulness, in the quiet strength of his protection, all beings could find the courage to step forward into their next becoming, trusting in the perfect unfolding of their own unique journey through the endless doorways of life. I hope this journey through the wisdom of Janus has guided you peacefully through the threshold between wakefulness and sleep. May the ancient guardian of transitions watch over your dreams and bring you the rest you deserve. If you found comfort in this tale of doorways and divine protection, please subscribe to discover more mythological stories that will cradle your nights to come. You can now let this video continue playing in the background. The soothing music that follows will help you drift even deeper into peaceful slumber. Make yourself completely comfortable and allow your body to surrender fully to rest. Just as Janus stands eternal watch over all thresholds, this gentle melody will guard your sleep through the night.